Welcome to the podcast of the Political Page blog with commentary from an attorney and entrepreneur on the political and social issues of the day, from a rationalist, libertarian, and often irreverent perspective. This is Political Page, and here's what's on my mind today. Welcome back to the blog. Today's the 27th of April, 2019, and the blog today was entitled Tooth Fairies, Chimpanzees, and a Fizzle That Wasn't. In case you missed it, because we've all been distracted still about whether Trump thinking about stopping an investigation that he didn't stop into something that wasn't a crime by considering firing someone that he had the unqualified right to fire but didn't fire might somehow still be impeachable despite the complete absence of any high crime misdemeanor after a $34 million investigation that included basically all the way down to his underwear. In case we missed it because we were distracted by the media obsession with that, the GDP in the first quarter of 2019 was 3.2%. Wait, let's say that again. The American economy, the total of all goods and services, grew 3.2% in the first quarter of 2019. And why isn't that boring? Oh, it's not boring at all, because you know what that is? That is a pesky reality that has dashed Democrat dreams of Trumpian disaster again, as it has at every single turn. Now, our economy grew at 2.9% in 2018. And in 2019, it's starting out higher, 3.2. It is smashing every erudite prediction made for the last 2 years and as recently as last month, when the headlines were screaming at us that we were about to hit a recession. The proverbial chickens were coming home to roost on Donald Trump. But you know what really happened? What really happened is we actually beat the 3% number that Donald Trump has all along told us that tax reform and deregulation would guarantee us. And let's compare that to the previous president, shall we? Barack Obama insisted that a tepid growth rate of about 1 to 2%, I think he averaged 1.88, percent over his entire term, was, quote, the new normal for the Western world. And that was complete, utter, total codswallop. And that codswallop became readily apparent as soon as his quasi-European idiocy of the socialist utopia was abandoned by the United States government and pro-growth policies were put in under Trump. And what really burns your britches, if you'll excuse the colloquialism, is that the news media and all of the people that they quote as the absolute experts in economic theory never get it right. Have you noticed this? For the last 2 years, prediction after prediction after prediction turns out to be complete and utter tripe, and yet they keep quoting these people. Let's look at Paul Krugman. You know who he is? Paul Krugman is the New York Times Nobel-winning economist, expert of experts. He is effete. He is the ultimate hilariously puffed-up economics wonk who gets invited to all the right cocktail parties. And he is a demand-side voodoo economist. And basically what that means is that we tax the producers, waste half the money through the government bureaucracy, and then redistribute it as cash to the lowest earners, who theoretically will go spend it at Walmart and pump the economy. They call this government-directed investment. The word investment in this context means freebies to people who are stupid enough to vote for you, but investment sounds so much better in a policy paper. What demand side really means in the real world is that we're going to punish the people who work to give the money to the people who don't work after siphoning a huge chunk of it off for fat cat government union employees who also don't work so they can spend it in the dying businesses of the people who do work before we punish the people who do work so much that they give up entirely, fire all their employees, shut their doors, and sign up for disability and food stamps like everybody else. And I know that Krugman and his fellow economists find that to be a deplorable oversimplification by deplorables, of course. But you know what? We actually had an object lesson about whether that works by having Barack Obama in power for 8 interminable years. Because when you come right down to it, he accepted everything they said, hook, line, and sinker, and what did we get? Oh, we got a new normal, all right. Yep, we got double-digit unemployment, a rapidly shrinking workforce, truly staggering food stamp growth. Did you know it grew 70% under Obama? Anyway, a ton of disability claims. Suddenly everybody had back problems. The total collapse of American small business entrepreneurship and less than 2% growth out of it. And as far as I've been able to tell, most of that 2% growth was centered around Washington, D.C. and the limousine and call girl industries. Now, there you go. You've got an object lesson in how it works, right? But you think that's going to discourage the true believers? Oh, no, 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 ye of little faith. When Trump was elected in 2016, after having this experiment for 8 years and enjoying ourselves, Guru Krugman warned that Trump's election would be an imminent economic apocalypse. This is what he said. Markets are plunging. When might we expect them to recover? A first-pass answer is never. So we are probably looking at a global recession with no end in sight. And of course, Krugman was not alone. MSNBC agreed, if Trump wins, you'll see a market crash of epic proportions. There were even some economists at places like MIT who agreed that Trump would, quote, cause the stock market to crash and plunge the world into recession. Oh, horrific prognostications, isn't it? Plunging the world. I just love that one. In one of the more satisfying Freudian coups of the last few interminable years, Michael Moore, you know him, the spiritual guru of the Trump derangement resistance, swallowed all of this hook, line, and sinker. And even though he was very wealthy, he sold off all of his stocks in early 2017, immediately before Trump's policies took effect, and the market went up 25%. Oh, well, at least Krugman, Summers, Moore, all those people, they were right about one thing. There is suffering. Luckily, it's localized to their portfolios. But you know what's worse? You know what's worse than all of this? They don't learn from it. They were horrifically wrong then. They continue stubbornly, quarter after quarter after economic quarter, to predict disasters that don't happen and miss the numbers. For God's sake, letting a chimpanzee draw numbers out of a bucket would yield better predictions. In fact, as recently as this month, this is what Krugman was still insisting. He said that Trump's tax cuts have turned out to be what he calls an economic fizzle, and last year's record growth was a brief and rapidly fading sugar high. He was, of course, widely quoted. Oh, my goodness, he was requoted in such somber tones. Nobody was really asking what exactly he considers a fizzle. I mean, we have a 25% higher stock market, steady 3% growth, the fullest employment in 50 years. That's a fizzle? Now, others of his ilk do admit that the economy is kind of the precise opposite of a fizzle, but you see, that's the real problem, they warn. Yes, yes. When things are going this well, when retail sales are cruising, public confidence is high, there's full employment, tons of unfilled jobs waiting, a burgeoning stock market, great economic business returns, and no inflation, that's exactly when we're going to be blindsided by a bad recession. Why would they think this? Well, when you get right down to it, you know why they think that? Because they really do believe that there's a new normal. And the reality is that we're all going to have to live in gray Soviet-era apartment blocks and lined up for weevil-speckled government bread rations. It's inevitable. That's our world. You know, Larry Summers, you remember him, right? He was a Clinton economic advisor, a long-time Democrat demand sider. He now works at Harvard, where he's educating the next generation of Krugman wannabes. God help us all. He agreed with Obama that the 1.8% growth rate would be the new normal for all Western countries. And this is what that expert Dr. Summers said about 3% growth when Trump came up with the suggestion that that's what he was going to get. I'm going to quote him. Apparently, the budget forecasts that U.S. economic growth will rise to 3% because of the administration's policies, largely its tax cuts, and perhaps also its regulatory policies. Fair enough, if you believe in tooth fairies and ludicrous supply-side economics. Oh, doesn't he do Snippy well? I'm sure he's a regular at the cocktail parties as well. But it would appear for Larry that reality is ludicrous because in 2018 it was right around 3%, and this year it's even stronger. Now, we'd all love to hear from Larry on this, but I think that we ought to just insert a dead silence on his behalf, don't you think? I mean, a silence that's complete except for the dulcet flickering song of tooth fairy wings. Because you know what? He missed it. They all missed it. They're going to continue to miss it. You know that just within the last month, the progressive Atlanta Fed had a prediction of doom that was trumpeted wildly across the mainstream media. They confidently predicted that the first quarter of 2019 would be what they called a GDP pothole of less than 1% growth. Actually, 0.9% to be exact, because they love those tenths. Hilariously, CNBC posted an article in February sniffing that the 2.9% growth rate in 2018 was not really 3.0. See, they love the tense. And that for the rest of the president's term, economic forecasters agree that number will decline. Nah, not so much. But the reason that they and others predicted this just awful 2019 was because of the partial government shutdown. Now, why? Why would that resonate with them so much? Because that's where they live. That's what they live in. A New York, D.C. bubble of demand-side economics where the government is what pushes the economic engine of the American economy. And when the government shuts down, it has to create a disaster, right? No, it created 3.2% growth. Fortunately for the rest of us, the real economic engine of America is not a bunch of bloated bureaucrats slurping up sushi in overpriced Washington eateries. It's ordinary Americans in small and even large businesses. They live in a supply-side world that loves tax breaks and deregulation, and frankly just wants Washington, D.C. to get the hell out of their way. Effete progressive economists find this deplorable. They disdain it because it doesn't fit their ivory tower of theory. But Donald Trump is a deplorable, and he believes in those people, and he's looking at it from the grim, gritty world of reality. And there is no denying the success of his reality unless one is an economics expert. Thank goodness for the Tooth Fairy. Thank you for tuning in to the Political Page podcast today. Original blog articles, complete with a lot more information and great links to original source material, can be found anytime on politicalpage.net. That's political, P-A-I-G-E.net.